The leaves in Blackwood, Pennsylvania, always seem to fall a little too early. It is the kind of place where everyone knows your name, your truck, and your family's history going back 3 generations. A quiet stretch of the American Northeast where the local diner closes at 8 and the Sunday church bells dictate the rhythm of the week. But beneath this familiar veneer of Friday night football and autumn festivals, there is a permanent fracture. 30 years ago, a chill settled over the town that had nothing to do with the changing weather. The official police archives classify it as a cold missing persons case. The older residents simply call it the evening the silence began. A locked car left idling by the edge of Miller's Reservoir. The radio was still playing quietly to an empty forest. No signs of a struggle, no farewell notes, just an absolute deafening absence that has held a community hostage for 3 decades. Generations have grown up walking past those same dense woods, wondering what secrets the damp earth is keeping. When a town built on trust suddenly has everything to hide, who is left to tell the truth? Blackwood in the early 90s was a town anchored by routine. At the center of that routine was Elias Vance. 32 years old, meticulous, and quietly observant, Elias worked as a land surveyor for the county. He was a man who understood the geography of Blackwood better than anyone. Every property line, every hidden creek, every forgotten logging road that spiderwebbed through the dense Appalachian foothills. To the locals who frequented Mabel's Diner, Elias was a fixture. Every morning at 6:15 a.m., he occupied the second booth from the door, ordering black coffee and 2 eggs, sunny side up. He was not a man of grand gestures or loud opinions. He was the kind of neighbor who shoveled your driveway before you woke up and never mentioned it. His life was an exercise in predictability, mapped out just as precisely as the topography grids he drafted in his small, cluttered office above the hardware store. But a surveyor's job is, by nature, about finding boundaries. And in the weeks leading up to November 14th, Elias seemed to be looking for something beyond the usual property disputes. Those who interacted with him later recalled subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in his demeanor. The waitress at the diner noticed he had stopped reading the morning paper, instead staring blankly out the frost-streaked window toward the tree line. His landlord mentioned hearing the floorboards creak late into the night, accompanied by the rustle of large paper maps being unrolled and smoothed out over and over again. Elias had recently been assigned to survey a tract of undeveloped land bordering Miller's Reservoir, a dense, uninviting stretch of woods that most locals avoided after dusk. It was routine municipal work, preparing for a potential zoning change. Yet his field notes from those final days, later recovered by investigators, were unusually erratic. The precise, calculated handwriting gave way to heavy, rushed pencil marks. He had circled one specific elevation point near the water's edge 6 times, writing a single cryptic word in the margin: discrepancy. On the morning of his disappearance, Elias followed his routine flawlessly. The 6:15 a.m. coffee, the quiet nod to the diner's owner, the purchase of a single tank of gas at the local station. Nothing in his outward appearance suggested a man walking toward a void. He drove his tan sedan down Route 8, the taillights bleeding into the morning fog, heading toward the reservoir. He was stepping into the woods to measure the earth. He didn't know the earth was waiting to swallow him whole. By 5 p.m. on November 14th, the autumn sun had already dipped below the tree line, casting long, bruised shadows over the deep waters of Miller's Reservoir. Elias Vance was supposed to meet his landlord to fix a broken water heater at 4 o'clock. He never showed up. In a town like Blackwood, an unexplained absence is noticed immediately. It was a local fisherman, packing up his gear in the fading light, who first noticed the tan sedan parked at an awkward angle near the gravel access road. The engine was off, but the keys were still resting in the ignition. The driver's side door was unlocked. On the passenger seat lay Elias's leather briefcase, his thermos, and a half-eaten sandwich. Everything was meticulously in its place, except for the man himself and the heavy surveying tripod he always carried. The Blackwood Police Department, unaccustomed to anything more severe than a noise complaint or a stray hunting dog, responded with a casual unhurriedness that they would later deeply regret. Officer Jim Hallstrom, who had known Elias since high school, arrived on the scene expecting to find a man who had simply twisted his ankle in the brush. He called Elias's name into the encroaching dark. Only the cold water lapping against the rocky shore answered back. Within 24 hours, the quiet predictability of Blackwood fractured. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of volunteers combed the dense, damp woods. They walked shoulder to shoulder through the undergrowth, their heavy boots snapping twigs, their flashlights piercing the thick fog, calling out for a neighbor who had effectively evaporated. But the woods yielded nothing. No footprints in the soft mud, no torn clothing, no signs of a struggle. As the days bled into weeks, the absolute absence of physical evidence created a vacuum. And in that vacuum, paranoia began to flourish. The initial police interviews, rather than clarifying the timeline, only deepened the confusion. A retired schoolteacher living a mile down Route 8 swore she saw Elias's car speeding away from the reservoir around noon, driven by a man wearing a dark, heavy coat. Elias never wore dark colors. Yet the station attendant who sold him gas that morning insisted Elias had mentioned meeting someone from the county zoning board at the water's edge. The county administration office, however, had no record of any such meeting, nor any personnel assigned to that sector. 3 witnesses. 3 entirely different realities. It was as if Elias Vance had simultaneously existed in multiple places on the day he vanished, before fading out of existence entirely. The town of Blackwood was no longer just a quiet place on a map. It was a crime scene without a visible crime, a locked room mystery stretched over thousands of acres of unforgiving Appalachian wilderness. As the weeks turned into months, the investigation into Elias Vance's disappearance struck a wall of institutional silence and physical dead ends. The first major obstacle was the weather. 2 days after Elias vanished, an early Appalachian snowstorm blanketed Blackwood, burying Miller's Reservoir under a foot of heavy, wet snow. If there were tire tracks, displaced earth, or discarded items hidden in the deeper woods, the winter erased them entirely, sealing the landscape under a layer of frost. But the more troubling obstacles were human. When state investigators finally took over from the ill-equipped local police, they executed a search warrant on Elias's office above the hardware store. They were searching for the topographic map he had been obsessively working on, the document where he had marked the cryptic discrepancy. It was gone. The drafting table was wiped perfectly clean. His landlord insisted the heavy oak door had been deadbolted the entire time. Furthermore, the county zoning board, when formally pressed about the supposed meeting at the water's edge, remained steadfastly opaque. They cited a complete lack of official records, offering no personnel names, and the lead simply dissolved into bureaucratic apathy. Without a body, Without a definitive crime scene, and without that critical map, the momentum of the case slowly bled out. The files were eventually relegated to a steel cabinet in the state police barracks, occasionally dusted off by a curious junior detective before being returned to the dark. Today, 3 decades later, Blackwood is still a quiet town, but it is a town permanently burdened by a specific kind of grief. Unresolved loss does not heal. It merely calcifies. Officer Jim Hallstrom, now long retired, still keeps a faded copy of Elias's missing poster folded in his wallet. The locals who walk shoulder to shoulder through the fog looking for their neighbor are now in their twilight years. They still drink black coffee at Mabel's Diner, though the booth second from the door often sits respectfully empty. The questions remain suspended in the cold Pennsylvania air. Did Elias Vance measure something in the topography of Miller's Reservoir that someone desperately needed to keep hidden? Or was the discrepancy merely a tragic, misunderstood prelude to a random, senseless encounter? We may never know what truly happened in those woods. The damp earth keeps its secrets well. And until the silence of Blackwood is finally broken, Elias Vance remains exactly where he was left, trapped somewhere between a missing line on a map and a memory quietly fading into the dark.